Hello everyone, welcome to the session on society journals and open access. Are societies being pulled or pushed to open access? And welcome to our online audience as well. I am very privileged today to be joined by three wonderful speakers. We have Dean Sanderson from AIP Publishing. We have Emma Gulseven from IWA Publishing. I'm sorry, Dean, Chief Strategy Officer, I should introduce the titles as well. Emma is Head of Editorial and Production at IWA Publishing, and Emma Wilson is Director of Publishing at the RSC. So thank you for coming and thank you for supporting this session. We will be examining the key challenges of societies and society journals, particularly in transitioning their journals from subscription and hybrid models to open access, and the variety of ways and options for societies to proceed with that. And we'll be having an in-depth discussion on some of those challenges along the way and some of the practical advice and guidance, as well as the motivations. So starting with motivations as a topic for our first question, I turn to Dean. Drawing on your experience at AIP Publishing, as well as your previous roles at Springer Nature, what insights can you share around the motivations of societies, why they are choosing to move towards open access, and the values that influence them?
Thank you, Robin. So I'll start by saying that like most publishers, we are convinced that the arrow of history is pointing in the direction of open access, and we've been working with our society partners and talking about open access and moving in that direction for a very long time. But you know, I'll say that there's a couple of big challenges in the conversations that we're having with them. One is that the macro environment in the States, I don't really have any data to back this up, but I think we all know that the conversation around open access is a little bit different than the one over here. I'm reminded when I come over here and come to conferences like this, that here, and I think this is generally true in the UK and Europe, the conversation is really not around whether the future belongs to gold open access. It's how we get there and when we get there. In the States, it's a lot more muddled, the conversation around open access. And I'm not just talking about with societies, but among stakeholders in general. If you ask 100 people their opinions, you get somehow 100 different answers. And you know, ranging from people who are fully committed to an equitable open access future, to deep skepticism, to, if you're a member of the House Republican caucus, you think it's part of a gigantic socialist cabal, which of course it is, right? So when we have those conversations with our society partners, they're in, because we're working mostly with American societies, they're in that environment, and they're not quite, I would say, in general, as far along in the open access conversation as you are in Europe. But there's another big challenge, and I'll try to be brief, and that is that there's a lot on the minds of society CEOs these days. In preparation for this panel discussion, I had a conversation with a few of our society CEOs. You know, what do you really feel about open access? And one of them answered my question by asking me a question, which is, have you heard of the 3 M's? And I said I hadn't. And they said, well, the 3 M's are the things that we spend all of our time thinking about: mission, members, and money. You could argue that moving to open science and open access is an integral part of a society's mission, but I think people are spending a lot of time talking about, thinking about those latter 2 M's. We all know, I think this will be the case in the UK and in Europe as well, that society membership is a challenge, and money is absolutely a challenge as well. So, you know, the answer to how they're approaching open access is very much how will it affect my finances?
It's very true. And the discussion, it sounds like in the UK and in Europe, is at the point of discussing the how, whereas in the US, it's the why. And it's still at that point and that discussion, and hopefully that will begin to move forward. I'll turn to Emma Wilson now, and I'm sure many of you know that the Royal Society of Chemistry has fully committed to transitioning 100% of the RSC-owned journals within the next 5 years. Emma, considering some of the themes that we've just discussed, could you shed some light on the factors that influenced the RSC's decision, and were there any discussions that Dina's just touched upon that were reflected in your own processes?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I can pick up on that, and also good afternoon, everyone. It's really fantastic to be here and to be part of this panel. So many of the things that you said, Dean, have sort of resonate. In terms of our motivations, it really was, a lot of it was, as you said, mission-driven. So we do see open access as the most efficient and effective way of chemical scientists to share their knowledge to make the world a better place, and that's what we're all about. We also saw, I think there were a number of things that kind of came together. I think for us, there was a kind of timing issue as well. We do see I think the direction of travel is that we're going to be operating in a more open environment, and we wanted to put our energies in a forward-looking strategy. We wanted to be part of that pathway as well. As I said, mission was quite key to that. In terms of our kind of members and researchers, I think that's worth picking up on. And obviously we're UK-based society. We have a global membership, but the majority of that is in the UK. So our centre of gravity is very much in the UK from our researchers' perspective. Our members are increasingly comfortable with the idea of open access, and our researchers and our authors, particularly in the UK and Europe, are increasingly comfortable and want to publish open access. We've been quite successful in sort of transformative agreements, and researchers love these and our members love these. But of course, the clue around transformative agreements is they're supposed to be transformative. So we really felt there needed to be some new thinking. What does that fully open access future look like? And there was a session this morning that touched on, how can that be equitable? How can we do that? So, those things, as I said, all kind of came together. We wanted to really engage with our customers, our partners, our stakeholders to see what the future open access model is with us. Our vision, and it's one that we're now working with our partners on, is that our open access future, the vast majority of that will be through institutional models that are post-TA and sort of post-APC-linked publishing output. Now, that is a bold vision, and as I said, one that we're working with our partners and our customers to sort of navigate that pathway. I'm excited that some of those discussions and that kind of co-development, we very much see this as being co-developed with both our communities, in terms of authors, researchers, and librarians and funders. And we're excited at how some of those co-development activities are going, and hope to be sort of piloting some new open access models next year.
Wonderful. It's definitely, it sounds like a move to the next level of open access. We've had subscription, we've had APC models, and now it's really engaging with the infrastructure, the institutions, and the funders, and experimenting. We all need to experiment to move forward, and if we don't try new things, we won't move forward. Turning now to Emma Gulseven, because we have two Emmas on our panel today. IWA Publishing made a similar commitment in 2021 to move to open access using the S2O model, subscribe to open. I'd like to ask you to cast your mind back to the discussions back in kind of 2020 and 2021. Could you share some insights around the driving factors as well behind that decision, and in particular, the decision-making process behind the S2O model?
Yeah, sure. So just to give you a bit of an idea of who we are, IWA Publishing is an STM publisher, and we're publishing books and journals on drinking water management, sanitation, and we publish 15 journals, all of which are now open access. 3 of them were launched OA, and the others started off as subscription journals. So in 2017, we flipped a small journal to APC, and that worked well. So then in 2020, we looked at a larger journal. We flipped that to APCs as well. We thought there would be a large drop in revenue short term, and there was, with long-term growth. And we wanted all of our journals to be open access. You know, the International Water Association is an international organisation. It's part of their mission. But we realised that this kind of short-term financial dip wasn't viable for the business, and we weren't very comfortable with that. So we looked at other options, and we decided that S2O was a better model. One of the reasons was that a lot of our institutions subscribe to multiple, if not all of our journals, so it was difficult to split out journals to either flip or do single journal S2O. It was better to do everything at once, and obviously there's an advantage there that everything's immediately open access as well. And it was incredibly beneficial to do that. Usage pretty much doubled when we did that. Impact factors have all increased as well. And really we wanted to be open access. The APC part felt uncomfortable, and from a risk management point of view, S2O is a much better choice. And in terms of the decision making, there were lots of rounds of conversations with the IWAP board and the IWA board as well. We talked to our members, we talked to librarians and partners, and in the end, after all those conversations, we were happy to make the S2O decision. But I think, a really important part of that was there were lots of conversations, and, if you're thinking about S2O, then start those early and allow lots and lots of time to talk to all the different stakeholders.
I think that something, just to pick out on something that you mentioned, is around kind of risk management and risk mitigation. And I think in terms of any business model change, that is going to be a huge factor, and the influencing features that kind of pull the dynamics towards open access need to be balanced with those risk mitigation discussions. An open question then for all of our panellists. In the context of this push-pull dynamic that we're discussing today, what potential implications should societies consider in terms of diversity and inclusivity of research publications? How can we move to open access and ensure that underrepresented voices and researchers from developing regions are not forgotten about as part of this transition?
Well, I'd be happy to speak
of
to
course,
that, because Subscribe to Open is equitable open access in that there are no charges to authors or readers. And the readership and the site base for our journals, we've seen that we've got 3 or 4 times more readership in Asia and Africa, Middle East, Latin America following S2O, and a really rapid growth in the site base as well. It's all driven by usage in the global south countries. But I think that open access on its own doesn't solve equity questions. So something we've been working on very proactively in the last couple of years is making sure that our editorial boards align and are very representative with our authorship as well, and making sure that the people that are reading and writing for our journals are represented on the editorial boards. And it's a very kind of hand-built process, and I think you have to do both things. You have to have equitable OA and make sure that the global community is involved. And we haven't solved it. We're not finished, but those are the things that we want to work on. And it feels right for us to do it, but it's also explicitly part of the association's mission.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that I think we're all trying to tackle this issue of diversity on our editorial boards and among our editors in the physical sciences and specifically applied physics. Sometimes that diversity is difficult because it's a very heavily white male Western community historically. But no, we take it very seriously, and we're trying proactively to work towards more diversity on our sides in terms of who's making the decisions and who's representing us out in the community. But the challenge of diversity in open access is a big one, right? I mean, you mentioned it, Emma, in the conversation this morning. We know that the conversation has been swinging back to equity in access to authors and how the APC model is problematic. There are no easy answers there. We're also testing Subscribe to Open precisely because I remember sitting in a conference room with James Butcher 5 or 6 years ago talking about S2O, and we both left that conference room thinking, well, that won't work. And it may not work in the long run. We're not sure that it's going to work in the long run, but the advantages on both sides of the equitability equation are pretty substantial. What it might not be equitable to are the libraries and subscribers, right? That's the long-term worry, that they're going to think, well, this is kind of unfair for us to foot the whole bill. But for readers and authors, it's actually a brilliantly simple solution.
Thank you.
I mean, I can add a few things, although they've been covered in terms of some of the, more better representation on editorial boards, those sorts of things. That's something, of course, that we're striving for and have programs for that. In terms of equitable open access, I think this is a huge challenge. I think we have to kind of, fess up to that as well. Again, don't have the answers on that. We're part of the, a number of kind of working groups about how can the sort of post-APC models work? What does that look like? How do you stop, having one inequitable model being replaced by another? So we're mindful of that. We understand some of those challenges, but I really don't think that we have the answers for that. And there'll be many people in the room that will be contributing to kind of solving those problems. I think the industry's kind of called it out, but I don't think there is a clear magic bullet on that one.
As Dean said, diversity in open access is a difficult problem, but it is one we haven't resolved yet. That hopefully we can all work together. And if you do have any comments you would like to add as part of this discussion and any projects that you're working on, feel free to put it in the chat. I have my colleague Mariam Tahid, who is monitoring the chat today, and we welcome your questions as part of this discussion. Join us both online and in the room. When it comes to open access and the APC model, there is a common comment that revenue is highly dependent on volume. Volume of publications. How are society publishers engaging with this tension and engaging with editors to address this and find that balance between quality and quantity?
I can
Please
kick us
do.
off on that one, because I'm not sure I completely. I mean, again, I think it depends on your business models. I think it depends on the size of your portfolio. I think it also, depends on the kind of portfolio that you have. At the RSC, we have 55 journals. We're publishing around 35,000 articles a year. And we have a portfolio strategy. So we have some journals that we really want them to be, driving their field forward, agenda setting in their communities. We have others that are much more specialised. We have ones across the whole of chemistry. We have ones that are really quite broad publications that are much more kind of inclusive in terms of the content that we accept and publish in those. So we have a kind of body of content. We're always, publishers, we're striving to develop our content and to grow it as appropriate. But I don't see ours as being completely linked to the business models and that portfolio strategy. I mean, at the RSC, and I'm sure we'll say the same thing. Of course, it's about the quality standards that we set and that our editorial board set, that we're working with our community to set. Those sit at the heart of everything that we do, and we will not be. As I said, although we run a portfolio strategy, it's very clear if there was a direct question about whether it's lower quality content growth or versus the revenue, is the quality that trumps.
And ultimately quality attracts quality.
Yeah.
So you can grow portfolios in a manageable way by focusing on that quality aspect. Would anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that there is necessarily an inverse relationship between quantity and quality. I think we all are having conversations with our editors, and of course it's a portfolio issue. We're not trying to necessarily increase article volume everywhere, but I think we are looking forward to the future and seeing that we do need to be more inclusive and to publish more. So I think probably everybody, not just not-for-profit or society publishers, are having those conversations with their editors. At AIP Publishing, our most successful journal in terms of article volume, it's a hybrid journal called Physics of Fluids, has increased its article volume more than sixfold over the last 5 years and has a much higher impact factor at the same time. And we've seen that same effect with MDPI and Frontiers also, that sometimes really rapid growth doesn't necessarily lead to lower quality. Sometimes it does, but I mean, the trick is to find that sweet spot where you're growing fast enough that you can still maintain the quality.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Emma and Dean have both said, and I also think we shouldn't fall into the trap of feeling like you need to publish more in APC journals and focus on that, because we should be mindful of high-profile examples of where some publishers have fallen foul of that, and huge amounts of retractions have had to happen and so on. I think above all, certainly for us, and the quality has to come first.
Quality is the priority. I think that's what we can take away from that. We want to save some time for questions, but I would like to try, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, to ask one last question before we go over to the audience. And it's a question on collaboration. And, collaboration and partnerships among societies, publishers, and other stakeholders, they can and will and do play a crucial role in that transition to open access. Have you seen any really successful examples of collaboration in facilitating open access and perhaps expediting the adoption of open access? And can you give any advice to perhaps societies in the room on how they can leverage these connections and collaborations?
Again, I'm happy to give some sort of perspective from the sort of chemical sciences community. Certainly one that I would call out is ChemArchive, the preprint server for chemistry, which is a partnership between the American Chemical Society, ourselves, the RSC, the German Chemical Society, GDCH, the Chinese Chemical Society, and the Japanese Chemical Society. So that's a community-led, society-led and owned initiative that was launched, I think, 5 or 6 years ago now, and has gained some traction, quite significant traction in the community. So that's been a great example of how societies can collaborate in an open science environment. We've also collaborated with the Royal Society on their Open Science journal as well, and we provide some of the peer review services for the chemistry manuscripts there. Although having said all that, and I do think that partnerships and collaborations are going to be increasingly important, and I do think with shared values, societies will be increasingly working together. I would also say I thought we'd be working together a little bit more than we are, actually. So yeah, I'll go over to, hand over to other panel members on that one as well.
Yeah, and I'll say I bring a somewhat a slightly different perspective to it, because I spent 22 years at Holtzbrink and Nature Publishing Group and Springer Nature. So I came to AIPP 2.5 years ago from a massive publisher, and scale is a real thing. You know, there's a question in one of the sessions this morning. Somebody asked, our publishing division has 2 people. How do we do marketing, right? Scale is a problem for smaller publishers, and compared to Springer Nature or Elsevier, we are all tiny, right? And to me, it is essential that we find ways to work together in order to sort of overcome that scale disadvantage. And my theory is that, there hasn't been enough pressure maybe in the past to do it, or people are very jealous of their independence. But I think we just got to get over that and try harder.
Yeah, and I can offer a sort of an S2O perspective. So the S2O community of practice we're part of. It's made up of collaborators, funders, publishers, librarians, and our experience of being in the community of practice has been really, really positive. Lots of people are very happy to share experiences and work together. And I think that the progressive publishers who are interested in OA have, in our experience, tended to be happy to share experiences with each other. And I think that's really important. It's the only way that we'll be able to move forward if all the stakeholders come together.
Thank you. I think some really interesting points there around collaboration and moving forward and getting over that point of competition, I think, is a key there. I would like to open up now for questions and give lots of time to questions. We have one question in the room, so hopefully we can get a microphone just down to the right here. In the meantime, my co-chair, Mariam, is going to open up a poll in the chat. So if you've got the app, you can go in and vote on whether you think societies are being pulled or pushed towards open access, addressing the actual question on our session. Over to you for your question.
Hi, Nico Goncharov, Osmanthus Consulting. For Emma, a question. Having gone fully open, or well on your way to it, in the case of RSC, what do you think, what added value can you offer your membership by making that transition? Because that's, so addressing the second M, and maybe the third M as well that Dean mentioned, but is there a way that you can bring added benefits to your members, either in terms of services, in terms of recognition, by making this transition to full open?
That's a great question, actually. I mean, yes, potentially. I think there is. I think in terms of our author group, I think you can make a very strong proposition around that transition to open access, around the authorship. In terms of membership, who are a subsection of our authors, and quite a small subsection, and more broadly, though, our membership group, again, on a holistic level, I think the impact of the RSC will increase, so in terms of the visibility and the influence of their society. But on an individual level, I think that's, I'd have to give that some thought, actually, but that might be one we need to need to crack in a bit more of a sophisticated way.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
Your considered responses.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and from our side, I would agree with everything you say. I think that broadly our members very much see the benefits of everything being open access. From authors, editors, we've had nothing but positive comments. It has increased, I think, the visibility of IWA, especially in the Global South, where a lot of the things that we're publishing are extremely important. For people who, particularly corporations who have memberships, it's a trickier thing with people who, they previously could subscribe to our journals. What do we offer them? And we have, a tier of subscriptions where they have access to older material that is not currently open access. That is definitely something that we had to give really careful consideration to. And when I talked earlier about the rounds of conversations that we were having with with members, with the board, that definitely the member benefits part was definitely a huge part for them. Yeah.
Thank you for that great question. Are there any other questions? Maybe we could have an online question while we get a microphone over to the gentleman in the corner. Marion?
So we have 4 questions on the app. The first question, it may be that in the future, societies look to partner with born open access publishers over traditional publishers. Do you see a value in large institutional agreements and deals that commercial publishers offer?
It's a great question. Anyone on the panel would like to have a crack at that question?
I mean, go. You're gonna.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So if I understood the question correctly, it was about. Actually, can you say it again? Sorry.
Sure. It may be that in the future, societies look to partner with born open access publishers rather than traditional publishers. Do you see a value in the large institutional agreements and deals that commercial publishers offer?
I mean, I'm going to say yes, because we believe that a lot of our open access journey will be supported, if our customers agree, our institutional customers agree, be supported by sort of post-TA institutional agreements. Whether I would call those large commercial deals, because compared to, I was going to say, we're not a commercial publisher, and we're tiny compared to the big 5. So, but we do see that as for us, because we're a mixed model publisher, we have an in-house sales team, we have existing relationships with institutional librarians, we have an existing kind of spend there. We see that as a good potential route for us, yeah.
And here with the counterpoint is Robin Mugridge.
I was just thinking. I mean, I have to declare a conflict because I am from a big publisher. But, I was just thinking that I think big publishers give the investment to be able to experiment with new models and things. So, for example, at Frontiers, we are currently piloting a flat fee agreement with the University of California Systems, where there's a certain flat fee, and then the publication is, for all intents and purposes, unlimited. And that means that we're moving away from APC per paper. And this is something that we're piloting with a small number of journals. And I think perhaps the benefit of working with a larger, maybe born OA publisher is that ability to experiment and mitigate the risk of that experimentation, as we've kind of mentioned before as part of one of the other questions. Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, hello. It's Anthony Watkinson, Cyber Research. When I saw the heading for this thing, I thought you were going to discuss the other little problem that Wiley have had, not the Hindawi one, but the other problem where one of the editors is said to resign because they forced him to go open access. Okay? And that was what I was thinking you might be talking about. But you're not talking about forcing people to go open access, are we? Well, we may have to do. Yeah?
I mean, it's a sensitive issue, Anthony. Yeah, I mean, I might defer to my esteemed panelists to answer this.
No, we're not. I mean, we're not forcing people. we've got our own journals, of course, and then we've got our society publishing partnerships. And you know, you can lead that horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So I think the value proposition for us to them is we can test these things out. We can, so when we announced the test with Subscribe to Open, there was some interest from our society publishers in participating, but at the end of the day, they were very content for us to test it out, find out how it works, and then let them know, right? They're not in a position to take huge risks, but we are in a position to take bigger risks.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of forcing them, it's a matter of showing them via experimentation, right? That's what it should be about.
Yeah, and I'd also say that it's very much dependent on the field you're working in. I mean, we reached the point certainly before 2021 when all our journals went OA, where editors, authors, everyone in the community was very aware of open access and had kind of moved beyond the suspicion, I guess, of open access and viewing it as very much a predatory thing. You know, everyone, editors or authors, all aware of funder mandates and OA requirements, and I think, you know, that is in large part field specific.
I mean, we worked with our editors quite closely, and I do think, you know, society publishers, you know, if we're not, you know, if we're not closer to our community than our commercial counterparts, we're probably doing something wrong. So we did, but I think we also have the advantage that we are publishing more, you know, within a certain discipline. So it, you know, and it is discipline dependent, and timing is important. So I think, I know if the RSC had said this 5 or 6 years ago, we would not have had the same encouragement from our, you know, sections of our community. Mm-hmm. But so timing was everything there. Yeah.
I think most of the community and most fields, not all fields, agree that open access and open science is a good thing, but we're not necessarily at a point where we want to drag along everyone with us, because if not everyone is committed and all the stakeholders are committed, it's a huge change and it's not going to work unless everyone is committed to that.
I would say, though, that we have had a different, although the response from our community has been positive, there are geographical differences in that, and the types of questions that research communities ask, for example, in India, are very, very different from the questions that researchers ask in the UK.
Or discipline specific.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at the subdisciplines of physics, there is a wild variation between fluids physics and particle physics regarding open access. So it is a confusing situation, to say the least.
I know we have several more questions online, and we do have a few more minutes. Mariam?
So are the methods described by both the RSC, open access agreements with institutions, and IWA, Subscribe to Open, more achievable means of conversion for societies with larger portfolios of journals than those with only 2 or 3 journals?
It's a big question.
So can you say the question again?
Yeah.
So are the methods described by both the RSC, so open access agreements and institutions, and IWA, Subscribe to Open, more achievable means of conversion for societies with larger portfolios than those with only 2 or 3 journals?
I mean, I'll jump in there. It wasn't actually addressed at me, but I'll say, you know, we're in the middle. We're going to test S2O for 2 of our biggest journals in 2024. But you can speak more openly to this, more directly to this, Emma. But in our experience, the people that we've spoken to, the implementation is actually pretty straightforward. It's not undoable, and it feels to me very much like anybody could do it. I mean, do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the huge advantages of Subscribe to Open is that the messaging to your subscribers is incredibly simple. It's effectively, you don't have to change anything. What's changing is the way that we're publishing the journals, but you have exactly the same workflow. In our case, we kept the pricing exactly the same, and it was a very simple proposition in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would concur, although I'm not, you know, as expert as you guys in the Subscribe to Open, but my understanding is that actually it's a very simple. Once a decision has been made, which isn't simple, it's a much simpler way to transition for particularly smaller publishers. Yeah. Whereas going through institutional agreements has many advantages, but those are detailed and complex, negotiations and as I said, actually for us, that's a whole, it'll be 2 years of co-development.
Yeah. Simple is not one of the words you use to describe it.
I was going to add that the institutional agreements that we have at Frontiers, it takes a long time to develop them, and I would say it's maybe more worthwhile to do on a larger portfolio. We have a couple minutes, maybe one more. Oh, we have one question in the room. If we could get a microphone to Heather, just right at the front. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Staines from Delta Think. Just on the subject of societies partnering with larger publishers, I'll just give a shout out. Robin participated last fall on one of a series of 2 panels where I interviewed societies working with partners, and then the partners who are working with societies, one group of mixed model publishers and one of OA, born OA publishers. And so those are free online to access if you are interested in learning more. But it seems that the Subscribe to Open community of practice has been widely beneficial to the participants beyond Subscribe to Open, just giving them the opportunity, among their peer group to learn, lots of things. And I know that there is the Society Publishers Group and Society Publishers Coalition and things like that, but it seems that it might be beneficial to have some other sort of communities of practice where similar societies might, learn together, or societies might learn from folks in a different discipline or from the university presses. And so I'd love to see, in future programs, maybe somebody kind of germinating that type of idea. So if you have anything to suggest on that front, I'd love to hear about it.
We've talked about collaboration, and maybe the time it's time to put our money where our mouth is and get together with societies and have that viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that the whole this whole area of discussion, it's I think publishers are kidding themselves if they think they can solve that on their own. The only way we're going to do it and to progress, and it is evolving, is if we work together.
Yeah, and as simple as S2O is in theory to implement, you don't want to just do it, right?
Yeah.
You do want to think about it, and we got tremendous support from the community of practice.
I think that is a wonderful note to end on. I know there are some more questions in the chat, and we will make sure that we answer them after the session. I do need to look at my notes because I have to notify you of a room change. There is a change. I think it's the Disruption in Scholarly Publishing session that is on next, and we will have, thank you, Susie. We will have a 5-minute break to change rooms. Thank you so much, and thank you to my panelists for this session.